All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. This is our November meeting for the Native Plant Society of Texas, Williamson County chapter, and we are happy to be here. We're going to have a little bit of business and then a very short meeting with that, and we'll hand it over to Justin Hayes here very shortly. So there we go. Get the right window going. We want to thank Sue Weissman. She asked for a budget to make a donation to the Useful Wild Plants of Texas, Volume 5, and we are sponsoring the Hill Country Rain Lily. The book itself is a series of 15 volumes, and we are going to be in Volume 5, which is going to come out next. Lifetime endeavor to alphabetically list every plant and its uses in the Southern Plains. And so that's quite a ambitious effort. This is the Hill Country Rain Lily, which you'll see around our area in Williamson County after a rain. And it's very showy, fragrant blooms. A couple of days after it rains, they last for a couple of days, but you'll just see fields of them. You can also dig up the bulbs. They're a bulb. You can dig them up in areas that are going to be under construction and dig them up. I did that here in Sun City before they put some houses in an area and dug up a bunch of bulbs and have those in my garden beds. You can also find them sometimes at our plant sales. So they are abundant through Williamson County, and they do well in a lawn because you can mow right over them. And they only pop up after rain, so it's a few days that you get to see them, and then they're gone again. So because we're not going to meet in December, I thought I'd go ahead and give you a December plant of the month. This is the fall aster. This is great fall nectar. So you need to plant not just spring blooming flowers, but you need to plant for the fall. When everything's gone through the summer, and it's worn out and it's not putting out much nectar, then you have your fall bloomers that come in, and this is a wonderful one. It's very, very, very pretty, 1 to 2 feet tall, and makes a nice mound. It will spread, and it spreads underground, and it also likes to be cut back about halfway, or no more than halfway in early summer, much like your white mistflower and a few other plants like to get cut back to keep them a little more compact and a little bushier. So it's a great nectar source. Unfortunately, it's not very deer resistant, but just put some in and see if they leave it alone. You never know. My deer are different than yours. And when you put them in different parts of your yard, you may find one area where they leave them alone. And they're just a great, great plant, and they will do part shade. So that's also wonderful. We want to thank our plant sale volunteers. We had a very successful plant sale this fall. We set a goal for our income on the plant sale, and we beat that by 25%. So we're real happy. Our budget's looking very good. We can continue with our projects and continue to be a viable chapter. We want to thank Beth Irwin, who put in a ton of work as the plant sale leader. There's a lot that goes into this. We did three different farmers markets. So there's working with all the growers, there's finding the plants, making sure we have enough for each booth each time, and then just setting up and dealing with the public and all the volunteers and having a really fun time and getting to talk to people about native plants. So we have the best time, but it takes a good group to pull this off and a good coordinator to make it work. So we appreciate everybody that volunteered, and we'll be doing something in the spring, and just stay tuned and we will get back to you on what we'll be doing. We're already in the midst of planning for that. And so Beth's already got her plant wishes out there to our growers. We want to congratulate Bob Camper. He won the Benny J. Simpson Award. This is sort of a lifetime achievement award based on somebody that has served the chapter. He has served the state. He joined Williamson County chapter in 2008. He has been a webmaster for us as well as the state. He has done just all kinds of photography. And whenever we needed a treasurer last year, Bob stepped up and said, I'll do it. Not his favorite thing to do in life, but he did it because we needed help. And that's just the kind of guy he is. So we want to thank Bob Camper for stepping up and for being the person that he is. We also heard already about Nancy Benedict Award for Charles Newsom, but I wanted to show you the map that he did, showing the invasive removal he has done. This is Berry Springs Park and Preserve. The orange is the Chinaberry. So this is one of the invasives out there at the park. He has managed to virtually eradicate it, and he will not give up until they're all gone, and he will keep after them to make sure they don't reappear. Also the common mullein, also known as cowboy toilet paper, but that one has been virtually eradicated. Ligustrum was everywhere. He's worked hard to do that, and crawling through poison ivy and dense woods there. Bradford pears, elephant ears, Japanese honeysuckle, and a lot of other things. And he will continue to fight the good fight. So thank you, Charles. And these awards were given at our recent state symposium, our 40-year state symposium. Field trips, River Ranch County Park. The YouTube channel now has the video posted. So if you go to YouTube and you search on NIPSOT Williamson County, you will find our channel. We ask you to subscribe to our channel because if we get 100 subscribers, Gary gets to give us, make up a unique name for our channel. So we can be like YouTube Williamson County or something. The River Ranch County Park, this is a very interesting video. It's like 13 minutes long or so. It is still under construction. They have pushed back the opening date to sometime in 2021. We're trying to find out when it might open, but you can get a nice glimpse of just the amenities that are going to be there when they do open. So take a look for that. Upcoming programs, we are going to cancel December. We thought about having a speaker, but we thought, nah, let's just enjoy the holidays and take a break from Zoom. We love being able to meet with everyone still and to have great speakers, but we're gonna go ahead and take off for December. But when we get back in January, we've got some wonderful speakers, 50 Shades of Green, Neat Natives for Your Landscape by Ricky Lennox. Then in February, Texas Native Plants and Climate Change. And we also have gardening author Mary Irish coming in March. And she has decided to talk on Texas Native perennial border. And she has several books about gardening with native plants and gardening in the Southwest. So we're real excited about that one too. As always, if you have any recommendations at all, please contact myself, Susie Hickman, or go to our blog and fill out any of the forms and it'll get to Susie about suggested speakers. So this is, you're watching the Williamson County chapter of NIPSOT. You can find us on our blog and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram. So search on NIPSOT. And you can sign up for our email notifications on our blog. You do not have to join, but we would encourage you to join if you can, just because it helps support our mission and supports great projects like invasives removal at Berry Springs Park. Tonight, we're going to give away a book. It's going to be Nature's Best Hope. One lucky winner will be drawn. Gary will do a random number generator on all the attendees and pick a name, and I will be contacting you via email to get an address and make sure you don't already have this book, and then that'll be sent to you directly from Amazon. So thank you very much. And this website, by the way, is our state website, which is where you'll join and you'll do an affiliated chapter of Williamson County, and part of the membership fee comes back to our chapter. So we appreciate that very much. Tonight, we're thrilled to have Justin Hayes. Justin Hayes has been managing landscapes for a long time. He's worked over 20 years in landscaping, started as a gardener, worked his way up, became informed, has done a wonderful job, and is now supervisor at the Dell Medical District Sites Gold Certificate Landscape. At the bottom, you can read what Sites is or look it up. But he's also managed the Dell Seton Medical campus for the last 4 years. And he is taken our native landscaping courses through the Native Plant Society of Texas. He's also an organic farmer and has many other credentials, but we will let him talk about what he does best, which is gardening. So thank you very much for being here tonight, Justin. And I will turn it over to you. And I'm going to stop sharing.
All right, and let's see, share screen.
Justin,
now.
as you're doing that, I'm going to interrupt just a second. For those of you that are with us, if you have questions for Justin as we go along, you'll find the Q&A button, or you can also put those in the chat. I'll watch those and collect them up. Anything that looks like I need to interrupt Justin for, I'll stop him. Otherwise, we'll hold those questions till the end. If it's something that I can answer, I'll go ahead and take care of it then.
Okay, and just let me real quickly, someone wrote in, poppies were brought back from France by Georgetown soldier following World War I. So
I saw that. Very nice.
Yes, so
good
I
info.
wanted to let our audience know. All right, thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Like she said, my name is Justin Hayes. I've been in landscaping now for about 23 years. I started just mowing lawns when I was, 13 years old, and then just continued working my way up. I lived in Lubbock, Texas, doing lawns for about 10 years. And then when I moved to Austin in 2008, my grandmother, who worked for the University of Texas, said, hey, there's a groundskeeper position over at UT Austin. You should apply for it. And I did. And from there, I ended up getting the groundskeeper position, which I was in charge of taking care of University Avenue, the Blanton Art Museum, and a couple other areas. And I had a supervisor who was very intimate and passionate about using organics, about learning what was going on in the soil. Like why do plants grow? What do plants need? We're not just throwing chemical fertilizers down. My claim to fame is that in 2012, on this left picture here, we won Best Grass in Texas, and that's with Zoysia Palisades, and we did it entirely organically. And the entire crew was very passionate about us doing things as naturally as possible. From there, then that middle picture is the South Mall, that is the 6-pack, and that's generally where they hold graduation. And every year they used to spend anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 to rip up all that grass and replace it with new grass so that it would be, fancy and green for the graduation ceremony. So after we won Best Grass in Texas in 2012 for the left picture, I said, just give me a year, 1 year, and we'll make this grass for South Mall sustainable. So now we're on year 9, I believe, almost 10, I think. Obviously, we haven't had a graduation ceremony this last year because of COVID, but we have not had to replace that grass, and we've kept our inputs down to about $5,000 a year. So literally saved, 90%. And from there, this right picture is in front of the Blanton Art Museum. That's another grass area we converted. We've also done around the Turtle Pond, around Littlefield House and Fountain, and then eventually the entire campus is now converted to we only use organic fertilizers. We don't use any kind of chemical inputs if not needed. And so that was kind of the first steps of me being able to move into a new era of what UT would be. So as you can see here, we aerated, we used humates, we used all organic fertilizers from a company called Microlife, and this area still, in my opinion, looks great. I just recently retook it over because I've been at the medical district, but I asked for more area to cover, and so it still looks amazing just because I feel like we have built up the soil. We've reduced water inputs, we've reduced fertilizer inputs just because of taking the time to take care of the grass. And I know that it's turf, and that's something that, you know, generally we try and stay away from now, but back then I was young and I wanted to make the turf look good. So further moving up, if you look at this top left picture, you can see what it would look like every year before they would replace the grass. They would let ESPN trucks park on it. They would let tailgates happen on it. There would be large amounts of foot traffic that would destroy the turf. And so as you can see now, these are current pictures. I just took these a couple of weeks ago, that we have made it a turf lawn that we restrict traffic on it. We don't let trucks drive on it anymore or anything like that, and have saved literally, I guess now we're on 10 years, so about $500,000 for the university, just by making this a more sustainable lawn. And so with that, I was lucky enough to be able to be promoted to a crew leader over at the Dell Medical at the University of Texas. So this site is a 16-acre site. It cost us around 16 million by the end of it. But this was a conglomeration between the Wildflower Center, a couple of different agencies throughout the country, including an institute out of Boston. There was some New York institutes involved. Basically, we were just really trying to find the best way that we could have a fully native site that we could reduce inputs as far as we could. So part of it also was that we retain up to 80% of a rainfall of up to 2 inches on our site, and that includes using pervious pavers, bioswales. We have Waller Creek that runs through there. And so the University of Texas owns 11% of Waller Creek, and we have restored most of that corridor. And every year we do an invasive removal where we go through and not just in my site, which is just the south site, but throughout Waller Creek that runs through the university. We get together with other crews and we go through and remove as many invasives as we possibly can to try and keep the creek as natural as possible. All of our plant material for the site was sourced within Texas, within 250 miles. And so anything that we wanted that was native had to come from Central Texas. 26% of our cost was for reused plants and materials. And so that would come into play also with our heritage trees that we saved. So wood from the site was reused to make furniture, desks, I mean, everything down to coasters, pins, picture frames. I can't even name all the different things that our carpentry shop made from all of the wood that was taken off the site that we didn't keep on site. Still scrolling. So 2 million of our budget, of that $16 million budget, was to move 12 heritage.
We lost you, Justin. We lost your voice. Justin, we cannot hear you.
Was probably around $200,000, and they are insured. So at this point, if any damage happens to those trees from construction projects or people moving in and under, anything like that, that is actually considered almost like a building, that we protect that tree and make sure that it is insured and taken care of. 68% of our materials for the entire project, so that includes the buildings, all of the pavers, the walkways, the bridges, and then the plants that we planted came from our region, so within 250 miles. 100% of the materials that were taken off of the site were used in other sites within 50 miles. and we are also an all electric equipment team. So all of our mowers, all of our blowers, trimmers, weed eaters, anything that we use has been electric, which has actually moved to the rest of campus now. So anytime we replace any of our new equipment, we pay the money to be able to upgrade it to an electric piece of equipment. We've basically stuck with Still and Husqvarna, but in my opinion, in the past 12 years of having to try out new electric equipment every year just to find something that was comparable, I really feel like at this point in time, we're really starting to see comparable equipment when it comes to electric. It's a little bit more expensive up front, but when you get down to it, you're saving in gas, you're saving in pollution, noise, all of those kind of things. And so we're really trying to push that on the rest of campus now. And so the medical district site was the first to do that, but the rest of campus now is moving towards using electric equipment. So from the beginning of our project, we had a group called Siglo, and they were basically a group of horticulturists that would come through and, you know, oh, look, there's Bermuda growing here. Oh, you need to take care of this problem with a certain plant. They documented everything. They gave us weekly reports. We had meetings. And this is kind of important when you're trying to build a native landscape, because generally when you're building a new project and there's buildings involved and things like that, the landscape architect does not compete with the engineers. And so when you have the civil engineer who's usually in charge that reports to the owner, they're usually like first tier, and then the landscape architects are lower. But in this case, we had the chance to be able to be equal. So we got to be at all the build meetings. We got to say, hey, you know, you need to dig the soil down to this far. If we had Arunda or Nandina or anything like that on the site, and we were like, hey, you need to take care of this. At some point, we even asked them for all of our North Research building for them to completely replant it because it was so invaded. And we didn't want to take over the project without that. And so it was nice, because that's not generally what happens, is that, you know, usually the landscape is the last thing that is on anybody's mind. And so with the medical district build, we had the opportunity to be able to be at the table, and literally you can see him scratching his head to the right. He was the landscape installer, and he was like, well, but like we have to in place all of this. And sometimes we'd be like, yeah, you kind of do. So that's not normal. That's not normal for most of our projects. Training. So all of my crew, same thing as I have gone through my Native Plant Society training when they started their jobs. It was a requirement. It was in their job requirements that at some point they have to complete all 3 levels of Native Plant Society training. And I know we're almost up to 4, but at least the first 3. And then, you know, going to as many trainings as possible, because in our district, plant identification, being able to take care of the soil, bioswales, river and creek, riparian areas, like this is not your normal mow, blow and go operation. Like you need to be able to identify a plant when it is in its juvenile state, then when it's in its growing state, when it's blooming, when it's flowering. All of these states are very important. And so throughout my team, we regularly share when we find new material in our site. So we started with 50 different kinds of native plant material, but now we're up to, I think, 192 different ones that we've identified. And so we continuously add new material and new plant material, so that way we have a more diverse landscape. And so with that, obviously, you need to be able to identify what is an invasive and what is something that you want to keep. And so training is continual. We have the Siglo group come out. We have, I don't know if anybody here is a member of the Texas Flora on Facebook, but they also have a couple of people that come out on a regular basis and identify any new things that we have going on, as well as help us find, you know, sometimes we don't see that there's Bermuda coming in somewhere, or there's, you know, some kind of invasive that we don't need to have. And so they've helped a whole lot. This is we call it the armory. This is where all of our electric equipment is. So we were the first group on the university to be entirely electric. And we were lucky that Generally, when you start a new project or you build a new building area, you contract the installer to do the maintenance. In most of our experience, they don't do a very good job. They get their money up front, they are paid for 3 years, and then they show up one time a week, and they basically just try and get it done so that that way that they are fulfilling their contract. What we asked was for a 90-day contract, and let us have the rest of the money that we would pay the maintenance crew, and then we can buy equipment. So with that, as you can see, we got to outfit our tool room with all electric equipment. We have an electric mower now. I mean, basically our whole purpose was to try and make things as alternative as possible. So when you're dealing with noise pollution, where you're dealing with the smell, we have a lot of dorms. We have a lot of people who are in the hospital that, excuse me, probably don't want to hear a weed eater or a blower going outside their room whenever they're, you know, trying to rest and get better. And so part of what we wanted to do was make sure that everything was electric. So we bought top of the line, it's all Still and Husqvarna, and we've done very well with all of them. So as a point out, last year we only used 3 gallons of gas, whereas a normal crew our size would have used upwards of 400 gallons. And so the cost alternative is different because you're paying for electricity, but since we have our own power plant, we're run off of natural gas, which I have applied for a green fund to try and outfit our garage, which our tool room is in, with solar panels. So hopefully, fingers crossed, that'll come through this next year, and we'll be able to be a little bit more sustainable when it comes to our production of electricity. There's our electric mower right there on the right. We were the first in Texas to be able to get one. Very nice mower, runs 4 to 5 hours straight cut, got a lot of fancy features. I can even charge my phone on it. So it has headlights, a blower on the front. It was expensive, but we are slowly but surely, every time we replace a piece of equipment, we replace it with something electric. Waller Creek. So again, the university owns 11% of Waller Creek. So we do a really hard job to try and take care of it. Ignore the guy in the middle there on the left. But during the build project of Dell Medical Center, they had to use that as a road. And so they paved over Waller Creek and then routed the water around the entire site to the other side so that that way they could use it as a road, because we had restrictions on them being able to drive heavy equipment on the landscape, so that that way we could keep the compaction level down. And so as you can see, this is the right picture is after they were finished. They dredged it out, tried to remove as much of the material as possible, and then let Waller Creek flow again. But on the left side, you can see that there was obviously equipment driving on it at some point. Here are some more pictures of Waller Creek on the left side. So we do a lot of student groups and training and things like that, to where we bring the architecture groups down, we bring volunteer groups down. And so as you can see, it did grow, it did start flowing again. Yes, there's construction material in there, but for the most part, the naturescape has returned. This is a picture of, if you can see on the left side, and I think maybe I can zoom. Yeah, there we go. You can see how they just had a pipe system that flooded the water directly around Waller Creek. And so then on the right side here, you can see that now the creek is flowing again, and it actually looks a lot better than that. These are winter pictures. So compost. So I started our composting program back in 2009, where we started collecting our compost from the daycares, as well as from our coffee shops that are on campus. I just got with the local leadership and asked them if they wouldn't mind if we started taking it with us. And so originally what we did was we just picked up all of our leaves and just threw them into a pile and said, okay, it's static compost, we'll just let it go until it goes. And that was fine, but there was a lot of trash in it. There was a lot of things that needed to be taken care of. It wasn't being shredded or anything like that. And so improving our compost program was a big part of us starting and improving our native plants on campus, because we wanted to be able to create our own good product. And so on the left here, I started my program grounds for grounds, so coffee grounds for grounds on campus. Last year we picked up 22 tons of coffee grounds, and we diverted that from them going to the dump to going into our compost piles. In the middle, this is the daycare. So 1 time or 2 times a year, not now obviously, but before, I got to go over and I got to teach every single one of the classes about why composting was important and why their food scraps needed to go in a certain place and how we could use that. And so perk of the career, really. I have a 19-month-old now and he's awesome. And, you know, being able to work with children, and they were incredibly intelligent, of course. They all, some of them even knew what composting was, and they were teaching me things. And so that was that's definitely something I miss, and I hope to be able to get back to that soon. Teaching anybody about what we do is always a pleasure. And then on the right side, so this was spring break of last year. All of our crew that usually loads bags into that dumpster right there to the right was out, and they were working on a project. And so they didn't have the opportunity to throw bags into the trash can. So come to find out, we were putting about 360 something trash bags a week into our dumpster full of leaves. And I, of course, did not think that this was sustainable at all. And so we ended up purchasing 2 leaf.
Justin, I think you cut out again.
Yep. You're muted somehow, Justin. Justin. Unmute yourself, Justin. Justin, can you hear us? You're muted. I see your mute symbol.
Let me try to send him a message here.
Unmute.
Oh, there
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that was happening. Okay.
Moving on. All right.
All right. Can you hear me now? We're good. Okay. Where did I end off?
Plastic bags, and so you bought 2 something.
So on the right side, you can see all of those trash bags are filled with leaves. And this was just simply unacceptable from multiple levels. I mean, we spend money for the trash bags. We, spend money to have that dumpster taken off. So we ended up buying some leaf mulching machines that crush the leaves up in a 10-to-1 ratio. And so basically 10 of those trash bags would fit into 1 trash bag after you were done. And so that helped us expedite our composting process. And now we use those on a regular basis. And we restricted the ability for anybody to use plastic bags anymore for anything other than trash, which I still wish we could get away from that. But at least we're not spending 300 bags a week, throwing them into the dumpster and then those leaves just going off to the dump somewhere. So now we make compost out of those leaves. We do our, let's see, it's pathogen reducing heat process, PRHP. And so with this, you take a temperature thermometer, make sure that your compost is getting up to at least 130 degrees. And when your compost gets up to 130 degrees, that makes sure that a lot of your seeds, undesirables, bacteria that you don't want inside of your compost gets taken care of. And that right picture there is our final product. And so after using the leaf machines, including all of our coffee grounds and our compost from the daycares and things like that, we actually come up with a really good product. So we've moved away from having to purchase anything from any outside facilities. We just make our own product now. I also make compost tea. We call it UT. I'm not supposed to call it that, but until they put some kind of legal thing on me, whatever, I feel like it's appropriate. So we use that on our entire landscape now, not just in the landscape, in the medical district. We use it throughout campus, and we can make our compost tea for just about any process. If you want it to be a foliar spray, if you need it to be a root soak, We even have a spray for freeze protection, or for whenever it's getting really hot and we need our plants to protect themselves on the outside. And so I've actually learned quite a bit about compost tea over the past couple of years. And it's a great tool. It helps enrich it, and really I don't want to say that it's a fertilizer. It's more of like an inoculant. You know, you're really just enhancing the soil. The way that I like to think about it is that if a plant is a factory that through photosynthesis, it creates sugar that it releases into the soil to feed the bacteria and the microbes in the soil, then when you use compost tea, you're kind of like flooding the factory floor with more workers. So all of them want to feed the plant or eat each other, which is a bad way to say it, but you know, like basically compost tea and compost is a great way to enhance the environment, to make sure that your diversity in your soil is strong, and that's what in the long run makes for a really well-grown plant environment. Scroll. And so as you can see on the left, sometimes I use a little bit too much molasses to feed my compost tea. And so all of that is life. That foam is life, and that's what we have to look at, right? So I've gotten a little bit better with my mixtures, but sometimes when it's nice and hot and the greenhouse is nice and hot and you give them just enough sugar, they like to expand their operation outside of the compost tea brewing machine. So we are an all native and all organic site over at the medical district, but we are not all organic on campus. My blanket statement for chemical use is that if you get cancer, which in our case would be Bermuda or nutsedge, which if anyone has ever dealt with any one of those, you know that they're very difficult to fight. Nutsedge is in the top 3 noxious weeds list for 96 countries in the world. It's one of the most difficult things to get rid of, as well as Bermuda. And what I usually say with our site and all of campus is that we are a native landscape on a wooden boat in the middle of a lake of invasives. If you look around our site, all the other government buildings and state buildings and the hospitals and things like that, they all use like a common Bermuda. And that was just something that was very popular because it was easy to take care of. You didn't have to water it very much. And, you know, it was something that you could beat to death and it would still come back. I personally have found Bermuda roots 4 feet down. And, you know, it's something that without certain chemicals, it's just very difficult to do. I mean, if you go in mechanically, you can still defeat it, but you're talking about completely destroying an area just to get out. So the university has stopped using glyphosate several years ago, but we do use targeted pesticides. So for nutsedge, we use Certainty. And for Bermuda, we usually use Fusilade 2. And we do these in spot treatments. We paint if possible. It's not like we're broadcast spraying. The university a long time ago, and we're even working now with, it's called Herbicide Free Campus. And it is a group that organized out of Berkeley and Harvard, that they really try to push for the most herbicide-free campus that you can. And so if I had to say, we're probably about 90% organic. We do have to use certain chemicals sometime, but our list is under 5. We're all trained professionals, and we're not, again, we're not out there broadcasting it, you know, all over the landscape. We're usually doing spot treatments or painting or things like that. And so that's kind of my blanket statement on chemical use, is that if you were to get cancer, sometimes you need to use chemo, but you know, you can control it better. I think that responsible chemical use is where we need to be, not just the weekend warrior who's out there drinking his frosty beverage in his shorts and his flip-flops and spraying Roundup all over everything. You know, I like to think that if you use it responsibly and you do it properly, and you know, mark off areas and let people know that you're doing certain things, that they can be used in a responsible way. But for the most part, our site is little inputs chemically as possible. So here's just some pictures of our site. As you can see on the left, we use some little blue stem. Those I think are cowpen daisies on the right. This is a pathway next to the garage. And you know, it's great for our site that we see a lot of people come from the surrounding buildings, come out of their offices. They come out just to be a part of what Texas really looks like. You know, Texas isn't turf and boxwoods and Asian jasmine. It's you know, 7,000 different types of plants. I think we have, you know, 7,300 different types of native plants or more. I'm probably totally off on my number on what Texas has to offer, and that we really are a beautiful state. And so that's what we try and do in our sites. And now throughout the university, we're trying to add more native landscaping, the more and more that we can. One, because it requires less inputs. It can actually fight off invasives if you do it right, less water. So for example, LBJ Lawn is a 8-acre site of all St. Augustine grass. And last year we used 5 million gallons of drinking water to water that grass. Whereas this site, the Dell Medical site, is also 8 acres of landscaping, and we used about 1.6, and 800,000 of that was reclaimed water. 700,000 of that was rainwater that we collected, and only about 100,000 gallons was drinking water. And so what we really try and do here is show people that, you know, you don't have to use large amounts of water to take care of a landscape if it's the proper landscape. And Texas has, you know, so many different things that we can offer that are so beautiful in the way that we can portray them, without having, you know, to use a large amount of drinking water or bathing water or anything like that. Seed collection. So we do a lot of seed collection. As you can see here on the right, we have the most intelligent, best seed collectors ever. They separate well for us. But we reuse our seeds not only on our site, but we distribute it around the campus, as well as give them away. About 7 times a year, we have events where we give away plants, we give away soil, compost tea, and we also give away seeds to the students and the staff and the faculty to show our appreciation for everything that they do. Just recently, several months ago, we gave away over 400 plants and 400 seed packets to all of the hospital volunteers, you know, to show our frontline workers that we appreciate them, and that, you know, why not give them some life to take home with them. And it was such a success. Like, really, it was pleasing for everybody. I had a great time, and I was grateful to be able to give them plants and seeds. So this is kind of a description of our invasion, and how we're trying to not use chemicals. So as you can see, we got super invaded in this area, and what we did was we dug it out, we saved whatever plant material that we could, and then just completely redid the area with mulch. We also did a controlled burn. So we can't do large burns, and we've had a couple incidents with our burning, but I'll continue that here in a second. So as you can see here on the left, we dug out everything, got out all the Bermuda that we could, because right across the street over here, see if I can zoom in a little bit, as you can see, that little strip right there, all along the street was all common Bermuda. And of course, you know, anytime the city comes along to mow it or clip it or whatever, they just blow it out of the street, and then it would come right over to us. And so it's very difficult for us to keep invasives out just because we're constantly surrounded. So this way was we dug out everything, we mulched heavily, and replanted the plants that we could, and then reseeded. And as you can see on the right, this is the end result after a couple of months, is that it actually filled in with mostly native plants. Some of the invasive things that we use to remove invasives, we do use 20% vinegar. It works well, but it only chemically burns the top. So if it is a seeding grass, or it's like a spurge or something like that, that doesn't need a systemic spray, vinegar is great. What I do want to say about it, though, is that vinegar it can burn you, especially 20% and above. When you get into 30, 40, and 50%, you're talking about hydrochloric acid strength, like it could burn through your skin in seconds. So we do treat vinegar as any chemical. You know, you need to wear protective equipment. You need to make sure that you have a mask on. it can damage your lungs if you breathe it in too much, but it does work very well for anything that is not underground growing. So for things like Bermuda and nutsedge, it does not work. But again, when you're talking about a top surface growing plant, it is not specific. It will murder everything, but it does work really well. And so we have increased the amount of 20% vinegar, especially for things like hardscapes, when you're doing sidewalks, even if you're doing certain flower beds and things like that. And the great thing about vinegar is that it breaks down very quickly. So you can usually replant an area within a couple of days. And so if we need to go in and get rid of, just like mallow or something like that, you can go in and just spray it, takes it out within a day, and then you can mulch back over it or whatever, and it won't affect your soil or your biology. Whereas a lot of chemicals these days are even patented as an antibiotic. And so what you don't want, obviously, is to damage your soil and your microbes that are in your soil. And so vinegar is a really good one that you can use it, and then you can replant the area very soon. So flame torches. So this is that same area on the right that I was talking about earlier. This is what we did, is we took the large flame torch and they just tilled up the soil. They mixed it up in front of the torch. We went down 6 inches, and that's how we got rid of our Bermuda on that area. It was not 100% effective. However, this was our method to try and say, what if we just come in every 2 or 3 years and we really till up the soil and we kind of, really get rid of our invasives? The only thing about that is that then you need to re-inoculate. You've basically killed everything with fire. So you're going to have to come in with compost or compost tea or something like that to re-inoculate your soil with biology, so that way your plant material survives better afterwards. You could use a chemical fertilizer or something like that. But, again, if you're trying to build your environment up and use less chemicals, this is actually a good method. It just takes a lot of people and time to be able to, drag a flame torch across your soil and dig down that farm. But flame does work well for a lot of different plants, the same things that you would use your vinegar for. And so the only thing is that fire is scary. A couple of weeks ago, we set a light pole on fire, something that you would never think that you would be able to set on. It was raining outside that day, and we just happened to catch a light pole on fire. There was some brush right underneath it. It caught the brush on fire, and then it caught the wiring inside the light pole on fire. And so it was an ordeal. So as long as you have proper training, check your forecast to make sure that whatever the weather is that day is acceptable for burning. So I do recommend fire, but it's just as dangerous as any chemicals. You really have to make sure that you have had the proper training, you have fire extinguishers around, you have water hoses around, you make sure that you have enough people in place to make sure that the fire doesn't go somewhere it's not supposed to. And catching a light pole on fire, that was a total fluke. But it still sparked us to, pun intended, it sparked us to develop a training program that was even more thorough, that we work with the fire department, we work with local PD and everything like that to let them know when we are doing a burn. Because now, so as you can see here, I tried to develop a more controlled burning program. So what we did is we bought fire, like ash cans for your fireplace or your grill, and cut out the bottoms of them. And so this way we could do our bunch grasses by just covering it with a bucket, lighting the bunch grass on fire, letting it burn down to the crown, a little bit less, and then pouring water on it to put it out. And it actually worked fantastically. But the problem with it was that it's just very slow. When you have, 20,000 bunch grasses, it's difficult for you to go one by one. And so what we've done recently is we've kind of instated like we'll do this area this year, we'll do this area next year, moving to different areas. But again, this is something that we had to work with the fire department. We had to make sure that all the UT officials knew and everything, but it did actually work very well in the beds that we did. What we're trying to do now, and I've contracted our construction services, is more of like a burn box. So like a large area, hopefully, like 6 foot by 6 foot or something like that, that we can go along and we can do our meadows, but still keep it controlled so that way, we're not threatening our multi-billion-dollar buildings. Freezing. So this was weird. I got this idea because one year I was at Explore UT, and there was a science group, and they were doing the, let's freeze hot dogs and let's freeze balloons and whatever else and show everybody how awesome it is. Well, then when they poured their liquid nitrogen out, they went and poured it over on top of a root ball of one of our oaks. And I was like, hey, you know that like oak trees and most trees get their water within the top couple of inches of the soil. So like you pouring liquid nitrogen on it probably isn't okay. He's like, oh, hey, it burns off in like 20 seconds. I was like, yeah, but it's like negative 2000 degrees. So it's really going to burn some stuff off. So from that idea, strangely enough, liquid carbon dioxide and liquid nitrogen, if you have the proper containers, does work, but it usually only works during the winter. If it's in the summertime in Texas and it's 115 degrees outside, you're basically just blowing cool air in the weed. And it's like, thank you so much. I love this. But if it's wintertime weeds, and we've done this with liquid nitrogen before on some Nandina and some bamboo. So there's a couple of companies in town that you can rent an 80-gallon tank, and then it's $2 a gallon for the liquid nitrogen. The deal is that you have to buy your own hose, but it worked. We flooded an area of bamboo with liquid nitrogen, and it killed all the bamboo. And then we did another area of Nandina, and it killed all the Nandina. The thing was, though, it became bureaucratic, and we had to like get a work order, and there was like a whole bunch of other things that suddenly they were like, you can't buy any kind of compressed gas with your whatever card, and who do you think you are? Anyways, it's become a nightmare. So we don't do it anymore, but it was a fun experiment. So I'm saying, if you do need a way to get rid of bamboo or Nandina, liquid nitrogen works, and so does liquid CO2. Solarizing. I'm sure everyone has done this at some point. August in Texas, we have beautiful weather to be able to do this. And so this is the front of the nursing building on the left side. And what we did was just for the entire month of August, we covered it up, ran the sprinklers every once in a while because it would just pop up, but it wouldn't go through the solarization film. And you have to have water to be able to make the soil heat up. But in August, if you do this, it works. It is a great way to do it. Use the clear plastic or the translucent plastic. Don't use black because you need to be able to let the sun rays get through and heat up underneath. And so as you can see in the middle picture on the top, that was after we had solarized. So everything in that area literally died. We went down and did a little bit of digging just to make sure, but it did great. And then bottom picture was we seeded with a sun-friendly wildflower mix from Native American seed. And then the right picture is where a bunch of our electrical workers decided to walk through it and go over there to in the middle. There's a access point or something. Anyways, that was just me being. And then elbow grease. A lot of the ways that you can remove weeds is just get down on your hands and knees. On the right side here, you can see this is our rooftop garden on top of our health transformation building. The only time we could access it is before 8 a.m. every day because we have to go through a hand clinic to get there. And they started complaining that there was dirty landscapers coming through their hand clinic, and we were leaving grass and dirt and everything else inside of their very pristine area. And so right now I'm actually contracting a company. We're going to build a ladder on the outside so that way we don't have to. But as you can see on the right, we had to start early every day so that way we can go out and remove invasives. And it's pretty well the best place in Austin to pull weeds. Our heritage trees, we spent about $2 million to move our heritage trees. So we had 12 in the beginning of the project that we moved. If you haven't ever visited treemovers.com, I suggest you do. They have videos of them moving, 300-year-old oaks that it's just amazing how they do it, with cranes, and they have these fancy, super big machines that are like tanks. And whenever I was doing it, they used to do it. They would take these like blow up canvas tubes, and then they would move it like they used to do the pyramids. They would move the wooden blocks, and that's how they would move the giant pieces of stone. Same thing with trees. They had to move these giant canvas bags, and then they would blow them back up, and they would slowly roll the tree. And so it could take, a whole day for them to move a tree like 60 feet. The tree in both of these pictures, they literally only moved it 60 feet so that that way they could build the hospital, but then keep this live oak that was, you know, probably a couple of 100 years old. It's a beautiful tree. And so of course we didn't want to cut it down. And that's kind of UT's policy, as well as the city of Austin, is that we want to save as many of our beautiful oaks and aged trees as possible. Any of the trees that were cut down, we did repurpose the wood. So as you can see, like that Jesus that's right there in the center, that was done by a carpenter. All of the wooding inside of the chapel, inside of the church, was redone with pecan trees, everything down to the where they keep the holy water, where they keep the oils and things like that. On the left, you can see that they made tables, they made chairs, even those benches that are in the background, those were all redone and repurposed by our carpentry shop that we have on campus. And so we had the wood milled, but then we repurposed the wood for other things. And it went all the way down to coasters and pins and picture frames and things like that. So literally all of the wood that was cut down on site was repurposed so that we could use it elsewhere on campus. Wildlife return. Surprisingly, we've had a lot of interesting guests that have come into our sites and come down Waller Creek throughout campus. When it comes to bees, we hire professional beekeepers to come out. As you can see on the right, that was a sprinkler box that we noticed bees were coming out of. And then when we tried to pick it up one day, that's what we found. So I don't know if I can zoom in a little bit, but like this was almost an entire beehive that we found inside of one of our sprinkler boxes. And so that was an interesting day. And as well, this is a red fox or silver fox that now there's a family. There's multiple of them that live on our site. And just because we have so much native landscaping, that they have the ability to kind of move around. Raccoons, obviously, having a nice day. I think this is a crane of some sort, nutrias. We've had just multiple different kinds of wildlife return to the site that you wouldn't normally think to see. Egrets, just it's neat to see what Texas had before we were here. Our bioswales. So we have multiple bioswales throughout our site, and these have now been progressed through campus to where we're trying to use more bioswales, so that way we can contain as much water on site from a rain event. And so here you can see that we plant it with wildflowers, we plant it with shade mixes and things like that, so that way there's plant material to help with the filtration down into the soil. And so those bioswales help out whenever we have a heavy rain event for us to contain water on the site instead of it being flushed down to other sites. Rainwater harvesting. So like I said, last year we harvested and used around 700,000 gallons of rainwater. You know, obviously that depends on if we have good rain or good rainfall. But whenever the rainwater is low, we are hooked into the reclaimed water of Austin. And so the entire west side of the creek and throughout other parts on campus now have been hooked up to reclaimed water. So we're trying not to use potable water for watering the landscape anymore. And the entire medical district site is almost entirely either rainwater or reclaimed water. Student involvement and outside education. Obviously, we're a university, so this is a big thing for us. We really try and as many student groups as possible, architecture groups, HOAs, privately funded landscaping groups. The city of Austin right now is doing their Waller Creek restoration. So if any of you are familiar with the new Peace Park project, and there's another, like basically everything south of 15th Street, Waller Creek, the city of Austin has contracted a bunch of groups to follow our example of trying to go for a more sustainable landscape. And so I've gotten with a lot of their managers, a lot of their groups, just countless. I think I've given over 200 tours just to show everybody that what you can do is possible, that, you know, planting in the creek, using more sustainable plant material reduces water usage, reduces inputs of fertilizer. And so this is actually one of the bigger pleasures of my job, is that I like to be able to be with these large student groups and be with these groups that they care about our environment, and they, you know, they want to save water, they want to save money, they want to, in the end, they want to save the world. They want to change things back to what Texas looks like. And so I enjoy this every time. As you can see, I love standing up in front of groups and telling them how awesome my team is, and everything that we do there. Soil testing and remediation. So I test our soil twice a year in multiple different areas throughout campus, so that way we know exactly what fertilizers we need to add, and how much, so that we're not just throwing out large amounts. We're not just, you know, wasting money / wasting fertilizer, and then it's all washing down into the creek anyways. So we use some soil sensors. We use a lot of technology to be able to make sure that we are properly utilizing everything that we have. And so, you know, our final goal is that we really want to make sure that that we are using as little inputs as possible. So as little water, as little fertilizer, as little chemical usage to spray for certain invasives, things like that. And so doing our soil testing and remediation is very important. We use Texas Plant and Soil Lab. I think they're great. They use the carbon dioxide extraction method, and so I would recommend using them if you ever have if you're ever doing any kind of soil testing, which I do recommend. I mean, it's max $80 if you're getting the fanciest of the fanciest, and you know, there's multiple different options. You can go through A&M. There's a couple of different colleges that'll do it for you as well, but I always recommend that you do a soil test before any kind of installation or any kind of you know, plant remediation. Like if you're having a problem, soil testing or sap testing is a great way to figure out what your problems are, and not just, oh, I'll just throw this on there and see what happens. It's good for any kind of application, institution, or just your house. Data collection, same thing. We use
Justin.
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
I wanted to give you your 10-minute warning.
10-minute warning. Okay, I'm going to try and talk faster. I'm sorry. I think, what are we on? 43 of 59. I can do this. Okay. So again, data collection is very important. You know, we monitor our soil, we monitor the moisture and the salinity, and the salinity tells you how many salts and different extra things that you have in your fertilizer. So data collection is important for me, just because I like to be able to, so for me to be able to tell you how much water we used last year, for me to be able to tell you how much gasoline we used last year. Data collection is always important, especially in the educational environment. This is our rooftop garden. This is on top of the 7th floor of the HTB building. And it has been an example for multiple different groups. City of Boston has come out. The new Oracle building has come out. We've had multiple HOAs come out and just ask, you know, questions about how to take care of the rooftop garden. And I would like to point out that we have not watered the rooftop garden since October of 2017. So at this point, it has been almost 3 years, maybe a little bit more, 4 years, wow, that we have not had to water the rooftop garden. So this is how they started. They laid out a grid. Each flag represents a different plant. And they had these 2 squares on the left that they basically just moved across the rooftop garden, and then that's how they decided what plants were going where. It's changed a little bit since then. We obviously have added a lot of wildflowers, things like that we want it to just continue reseeding. But again, we haven't watered it in almost 4 years now. So these are some before and after pictures. As you can see on the left, this is what it looked like when they were during construction, and then on the right, further up, same thing here. They used a lot of erosion matting throughout the site. And the funny thing is that when we had the Halloween flood, and I think it was 2016 or 17, we had the Halloween flood, and it got up over the 15th Street Bridge. And so a lot of the erosion matting, and I'll try and kind of skip ahead a little bit if you want to see, these are the before and afters, but so right here on the left, you can see, on both sides, you can see where we had flooding during the project. All of that erosion matting that they put down was taken away by the creek. And surprisingly, the native plants stayed. So we kind of learned our lesson there about how native plants can be used for riparian restoration, and they won't wash away as the erosion matting did. We had a lot of plant failures, soil mistakes. There was, you know, as you can see on the right, we had some erosion from a lot of the floods. And so during our projects, we And then humans are often our largest invasives. You know, being a native landscape, a lot of people look at our landscape and say, oh man, it's just a whole bunch of weeds. They don't actually understand that it's supposed to look like that. And so a lot of the time, mechanical distribution, some of our other departments, as you can see, throw things just directly on top of our beautiful landscape, and then we just have to pick it back up. Humans, cigarette butts, I like to tout this. So we're not allowed to have ashtrays or anything like that on campus because we're a tobacco-free campus, but being outside a hospital and certain other areas, there's obviously people who have addictions and they need to take care of it. But as you can see on the left there, sometimes it can get out of hand. So on the right, this is not landscape. This is just landscaping. It's not an ashtray. It is a piece of sand and rocks that is just part of the landscaping. So that's how we kind of solved our cigarette problem. And then the homeless population, we try our best. We have a lot of organizations that we work with, Helping Hands, ARC, there's a facility on 14th Street, but we do have a lot of campers. We've also had people naked bathing in the creek. That's another story. There's all kinds of things that we run across. We also have to have Kevlar reinforced gloves because there are needles in the landscape a lot of the time when we're working. And so we have a metal detector now, and we also have to wear these Kevlar reinforced gloves that are needle stick resistant when we're kind of going through the landscape in the first place. So that's another human invasive, not that they're a problem. We, of course, are always, you know, we work with UTPD, we work with these organizations to really try and not just kick them out of the landscape, but say, hey, we do have a place for you to go. Please go here. They'll give you a meal, they'll give you food, they'll take care of you at least for 24 hours. And so, you know, being next to the emergency room, that's actually something we deal with on almost a daily basis. And so it's been nice to be able to work with the city on that. Tailgaters, on the left side, you got construction silt. You know, that's something that we also try and monitor on a regular basis, is just because, you know, we know that there's a lot of projects, the new Capitol project that's going on and the new stadium that's being built for the basketball arena. Like the sites they do try, but we, being at the bottom of the creek, we report that on a regular basis. On the right side, you see tailgating. It's also a regular problem for our landscape. And then finally, this is my crew. You know, these guys do most of the work. I get the pleasure of being able to talk about our landscape like this, but they do all of the hard work, and I try and be out there as much with them as I possibly can. But they're great. You know, they really do have passion. They all love what they're doing. And, you know, they continuously contribute to everything that we do. And so that's it. Did I do it?
Yeah, perfect.
All right.
You even had just a few seconds to spare.
All right.
All right. So I have been keeping track of questions that were coming through.
Okay.
I think we'll take about 10 or 15 minutes for these. And I'm just going to call them out in the order that I see them.
Okay. How do I stop sharing my screen here? I'm sure you can do that though, right? There we go. Stop share. There we go. Okay.
There you go. That's perfect.
Great.
And turn this back on as well. All right. So my list here. So from Charles Newsom, his question is, have you considered using your expertise to train other organizations for like, you know, like the Parks and Recs departments, that sort of thing?
Yeah, no, totally. And we actually do. I've worked with the watershed protection to do the Grow Green program. We've done several things out at the Wildflower Center. I work with, you know, because we're the flagship university, we have several other UT universities that we work with, as well as just any groups. Like I said earlier, I've worked with HOAs, I've worked with private landscaping companies. I'm working with the city of Austin right now, and I guess now they're called the Waterloo Greenway, not Waller Creek anymore. I think they're the Waterloo Greenway project. So that's 35 acres of parks that they are redoing to be more of a native, sustainable type of landscape. And so that's tomorrow. I get to go to the new Peace Park. I forget what the exact project is called, but that's a lot of what we do, is we work with other organizations to show them, you know, we've been doing this now for a couple of years, and so we've had our wins and we've had our loses, and so it's nice to be able to work with other people to help them have a more successful landscape in the future. So yeah, no, I work with any groups, and I'm also happy to, even individuals. I've given just one person tours sometimes, so I'm happy anytime. I will forward my information to your group so that if you ever just want to come out and see the site and ask questions and learn about what we do out there, I'm always happy to do that. That's part of what I do. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. This next question is related to your compost tea, and Billy Adams asks, how long does it last? And I think what she's meaning there is,
After
when
it's
you make
complete.
it. Yeah.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so generally you want to use it in, I am adamant about 4 hours, but I've read a lot about it can last 24. So here's the deal, is that when you're making your compost tea, it is oxygenated with some source of air. So whether you're doing like a 5-gallon bucket and you're using a fish pump, or like me, I'm doing 250 to 300 gallons at a time, and I use a full turbine system. But you have to keep the air oxygenated / enough sugar to keep the microbes alive and procreating. So if you keep it in the barrel and you keep it oxygenated and you keep it sugared, and you can even use table sugar. I use molasses. I use a liquid molasses, and that seems to, I've always had good luck with that, so I've never had to change. But as long as you have a sugar source and an oxygen source, it can last for quite a while. But as soon as you take either one of those away, that's going to start killing off the microbes that live inside of the water. In addition, try not to use tap water. Most of our tap water now has chloramide, not chlorine, so you can't gas it off anymore. And they purposely put things like fluoride and things like that in your tap water because they don't want things growing inside of the pipes. And I get that, but that's also a detriment to you making compost tea. So if you can use rainwater or a filtered water that doesn't have any of the extra chemicals or ingredients in it, that's what you want to do. And as long as you have that sugar and that air source, it can last as long as you want it to. But as soon as you take that away, 4 hours pretty much is what I would say is like, I mean, get it out there as fast as you possibly can.
Okay. Well, that's really awesome. I didn't know any of that. So fantastic. All right, my next
Compost
question
tea is it? That's a whole nother presentation.
Right. We're gonna have to have you back next year. Okay, our next question is from Mary Ann Cox. She seems like she's dealing with a large planting of Nandina, and was curious, maybe beyond liquid nitrogen, if
Gotcha.
vinegar would do it.
So because vinegar is not systemic, however, there is a product called Natria, not Nutria, but Natria. It's kind of expensive. It's about 20, I think on Amazon you can get it for like 13 or 15 a bottle, but it only makes like 1.5 to 2 gallons of product. But it is made from ammoniated fatty acids, and there's another chemical, I think it's called meclizin or something like that. But it is systemic, and you can replant the area in less than 5 days. It is the closest thing to a more organic product that I've ever found that works systemically with anything. So Nandina's hard because it is a root bound. Unless you dig out the roots, it's the same thing as like Bermuda or nutsedge. Like you can't just kill the top. So vinegar might work if you were to just like flood the heck out of it. But then I don't know what the quality of the soil would be afterwards. So Nandina's a hard one. Like that's one of those that we need to go back in time and punch whoever brought that over here. Because, but
Right.
Natria is a product that I have used on it before, and it works. It's just a little bit more expensive to use, but I feel like it is much safer than using like a glyphosate or something like that. So.
Okay, so either Natria or mechanical is what you
Right.
recommend.
I mean, just the only luck I've ever had with Nandina is just destroying the area by digging it out. And then, did I do more damage by mechanically digging it all out? There's always that question, more harm than good. If I go in there and tear everything out, am I actually doing good, or am I really messing things up? So.
Right. Well, speaking of nutrias, Charles also mention something that I thought of. Just as a reminder, not only do we have invasive plants, but we also have invasive,
We also have, you're right, we have invasive animals.
creatures, and nutrients
Exactly.
are one of those. Uh,
We just have the one family right now, so I'm kind of like, just don't mess too much up, dude.
um, okay, so my next question here, I think at some point you had mentioned you'd worked with some HOAs, and so Robert Camper asked, could you mention any of those? And then I think you already mentioned that you'd be welcome to talk to any organization. So if there was some HOA here that was interested, they could reach out to you.
Definitely, yeah. No, I'm going to be honest, I don't remember the names of any of them, but I've currently worked with my own HOA, and so they've started to remove certain restrictions of, like, you can't, can you have turf? Like my entire front yard, the way I've gotten around it is that I do a whole lot of potted plants, but there's certain rules that, unless you can get the HOA, and most HOAs, are just run by people like you and me. And so when you get up in front of them and you just explain, like, hey, look, I'm just trying to save on my water bill, or I'm just trying to, have a little bit more pollinator plants or something like that. There's always little niches in the HOA plans. And there's also laws for Texas. They can't tell you that you can't plant water saving plants or anything like that. The one thing they can do is, like, you have to have turf. So, but that doesn't mean that you have to go with St. Augustine, which requires 80 inches of water a year, which we only usually get about 35 here in Texas, which means you're supplementing, 45 inches a year. And so planting buffalo, or, going with like a mix of curly mesquite, or, something like that, you can still do those kind of things. And often, HOAs like to hear about that, is it's like, we're not breaking any of your rules. We're just simply changing, a lot of the times I've got St. Augustine. It came with the house. It's just something that I've never dug up. But now that I have the lawn contract and I do this on the weekends, I take care of 24 houses in my HOA. And now that we've switched to organic fertilizers, we started moving away from using any kind of chemical amendments or anything like that. I mean, the entire HOA is just like, holy crap, why haven't we done this before? Look at how much water we're saving. Look at how much money we're saving by using organic fertilizers and things like that. And so, again, I can't really remember any off the top of my head of the ones that I've done, but I have had multiple HOAs come out to our site just to learn the basics about soil and about what plants need. And, don't follow the recommended fertilize 6 times a year from Home Depot. It's just, I think that that's part of it, is just education. So I am always happy to either speak to an HOA directly, or them to just come out and see the site themselves. And if any of you ever have a chance for me to do a plug, come down to the site, come see the new medical district. It's beautiful. It's all native. It's wildflowers most of the time. It's something that's, you don't think of seeing in the middle of Austin, in the middle of a city.
That's awesome. Sounds like maybe a future virtual hike for us. All right, good deal. And then Charles has kind of a statement and a question. It's obvious from your presentation that you've done a ton of work and a lot of research, but also spent a lot of money converting these areas to native species. So thinking about
Sort of, yeah. In the beginning we did, but like that was the whole point about it, was that now, we do our own seed collection. We make our own compost. We make our own compost tea. We rarely fertilize compared to what we used to spend on fertilizer. So yes, in the beginning, and this can be said about a lot of the things like the electric equipment. Yes, the site was very expensive in the beginning. However, in the long run, we've ended up saving, millions of gallons of water. We've saved hundreds of gallons of gasoline. We've, moved to the point to where we do our own seed collection, and that seed can be used elsewhere on campus. So now we've started other pollinator gardens. We help the Jester Garden. So like the Jester Garden is where the students have gotten together, and it's a food garden. And so that's another place where we've been able to spread more pollinator seeds and like make more pollinator plants. And with this, education for the students, education for people who come to the campus. And so, yes, I agree that in the beginning it was very expensive, but I feel like it's one of those things that pays you back in the end, not necessarily in money, but in the fact that we spend less. That so like going back to the South Mall lawn, by us making that sustainable, at first we were spending $50,000 a year to replace that grass every year. But then making that grass sustainable and spending that little bit of money in the beginning, which was actually a lot less than we would have spent anyways, has now saved us, you know, $500,000 over the point. And so I think that what you have to do is that going back to data collection, going back to, we have this ability to show people like, look at how much money you saved because you went this route, rather than, you know, so for example, the new football stadium, the new arena that's being built, a lot of it is going to have the pervious pavers, the bioswales, things like that, to reduce the flow of rain that comes off of that new concreted surface. So in the past, that would all just go straight to Waller Creek and then flood businesses and people down the row. Like, it's not costing us directly, but you know, if somebody loses their family business because we flooded all of our water off of the concrete down into Waller Creek and now they just lost their business, that's, you know, that's being a bad human basically. So you know,
were you ever, or was the project ever asked to do like a cost benefit analysis of that initial investment versus
oh
the
yeah,
over time?
and we do this on a regular basis. So there's actually several departments and several groups. So like the Siglo group that I was talking about earlier, they still come out every couple of months. We deal with the Sasaki group. There's several different architecture groups and things like that that want us to keep track of those numbers, as well as like, so we have now the MS4 permit, which is for stormwater runoff. And so they want us to track things like how much trash do we pull out of Waller Creek? How much, you know, when they do regular tests to where they find out what kind of pollutants are in Waller Creek and where they're coming from, things like that. So data collection is a really big part of it. That, you know, so that we can, just like I just did now, to be able to tell you how much potable water we didn't use, how much rainwater we did use, how much gasoline we used, you know, like things like that are, they're regularly recorded, not just by me, but like multiple different groups, student groups, things like that come out and they want to monitor. The Texas Wildlife Association puts up game cameras down there. They want to know what kind of wildlife is coming back into the area because of us using native plants. And there's countless other groups that use our site as a educational / scientific research site, to just show and prove that doing things like this can benefit all around.
Okay, awesome. Let's see. There was one other question here that I lost. Okay, so Billy was clarifying. She was asking about the compost itself, not necessarily the compost tea. Is there a time frame on using your compost that you have?
Well, so generally what you want to do is if you're making compost, you want to do the flip every 3 days for 15 days. You want to make sure you have 5 flips. And while that's going on, you want to have yourself a good thermometer, if you can, to make sure that you're getting up to the 131 degree range. I think it was Pfeiffer or maybe Steiner, if you've ever read Introduction to Biodynamics or anything about biodynamics, that they, you know, discovered back in the 30s that there was living organisms inside the soil. And so the 131 degree range is what they figured out that kills off all the bad guys. And so if possible, because usually your pile has to be pretty big to be able to reach that temperature. So the better the temperature you can get to, which is usually a higher nitrogen content. So not so many leaves, but usually with your compost pile, you want to have 1/3 green, 2/3 brown. And so that would be either wood chips or leaves or whatever. And then you've got like grass and then eggshells and whatever else you're putting into it. You want to make sure that your pile is well mixed and well watered, preferably with rainwater, again, because that'll keep your microorganisms high. But the key generally is that you want to get to 130 degrees for 15 days. And so this is from the US Composting Council. I went last year before COVID and everything. I got to go to one of their conferences. And of course, they have a huge operation compared to anything that most of us could do. But so as far as that goes, if it's just your home pile and you're just, throwing your coffee grounds and stuff into it, and then the leaves that you rake from your yard, I would probably recommend that you go about 6 months, so that way you have plenty of time to get rid of any additional seeds. But even then, if you don't reach that 130 degree level, there can still be pathogens, and there can still be like Bermuda seeds and things like that could blow into it. And so that's why compost is kind of hard to do at home. But if you can get it to that 130, there's barrels that you can buy. There's, what is it, Kabashi, or, the black fly system. There's a couple of different systems that are home systems that help it break down faster. But that 130 degrees is actually very important.
Okay, awesome. Well, that's all the time that we have. Actually, we're a little bit over, but it's great information. No, it's fantastic. You gave me some ideas for some nuts edge that I've been dealing with for the last 3 years. So
good luck, sir. Very good luck.
So I definitely appreciate that. Randy, is there anything that you need to add before we end?
No, Gary, I appreciate it. I enjoyed that very much, Justin. So thank you for your time and
No
for
problem,
letting us hear about that.
And feel free to share my email address with everyone. I'm happy to answer any questions or help with any problems. Again, I've been doing this for more than 2 decades, so I've got a lot of just junk up here that anybody could use if they wanted to. So I'm happy.
All right.
No,
Okay.
fantastic.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. We'll have the recording posted in a couple of days, and you'll see that on our blog post, and it'll take us, we'll post it to YouTube. All right.
Thank you, Gary.
Good night.